What's going on YouTube? It's Teej back again with another video, and today we're not talking the NFL. Instead, we're talking the NBA trade deadline. I'm giving you 3 winners and 3 losers. There were a lot of teams I think made out pretty well. This might come as a shock. I've put up a lot of football content on the channel, but I'm overall just a big sports fan. I'm a big New York Knicks fan when it comes to the NBA. Don't know if that's surprising to you or not, but I'd love to add some basketball content to the channel. I'm thinking about picking up NBA 2K, getting some My Team up on the channel. Comment down below if you'd be interested in that, as well as just some in general basketball coverage. And before we get much further, please hit the like button if you enjoyed today's content. Comment down below what you think I got right and which picks you think I got wrong. Also, if you're new to the channel, like sports in general, please consider hitting that subscribe button. It would mean the world to me. But without further ado, let's get into winner number 1, and it's got to be the Miami Heat. Look, I'm going to sound like a broken record. If you've been watching sports, watching basketball coverage, everybody's loving what the Heat's doing right now, right? So 22-23, they got to a slow start, sitting at 7th in the Eastern Conference, 1 game back of the Hornets, though, for moving all the way up to 4th. So it's a really ugly and muddled middle of the pack there in the Eastern Conference. I think Miami, with the trade deadline, went from a middle-of-the-pack Eastern Conference team with upside to they're among the best teams in the conference. I might take them right now over the Sixers in a series, which is crazy. I also like, the Milwaukee Bucks adding PJ Tucker, but the Heat now are putting them into contention to be even with Milwaukee and the 76ers. They're atop the Eastern Conference. And look, they stole Victor Oladipo. You give up Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk to get a former all-star level player and a guy who you're going to have the rights to this offseason, so you're almost certainly going to keep him around. That means if you pay Depot, you're probably not paying Duncan Robinson, but I don't know, maybe they'll be able to find a way to make it work. But nonetheless, giving up Avery Bradley and Olynyk to get Victor Oladipo, they needed another ball handler. Depot can score on his own. He can shoot a little bit. I love that move, and they got him for next to nothing. And we'll talk about that trade a little bit more once we get to our final loser. That probably gives it away. But nonetheless, they also make the move for Nemanja Bjelica, and he's basically your Kelly Olynyk replacement. Good stretch 4, really like that addition. They also add Trevor Ariza, and I mean, Ariza, most traded player in NBA history, actually, but it kind of makes me feel a little bit, and gives me flashbacks of sorts to the Andre Iguodala trade they made last year. Players in the back end of their career, Ariza's been around the league, obviously, has tons of playoff experience. I don't know how much he's going to provide when it comes to on-court production, points, rebounds, steals, etc., etc. This is already a really deep team, but nonetheless, he adds that veteran leadership, same what they got with Iguodala last year. Also, the Heat are the frontrunners to sign LaMarcus Aldridge, who just got bought out by the Spurs. So you're looking at one of the best teams in the NBA in regards to depth. Like, they kept Tyler Herro, they kept Kendrick Nunn, they still have Goran Dragic, of course, on top of Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, and plenty of other talented players across the roster. Then you add Depot to the mix. I mean, this team's nasty. And plus, I like Victor Oladipo for that feel, right? Like, he's somebody who's playing for his 3rd team in the same season. When he played in Oklahoma City, it didn't really work out with him and Russ. People kind of labeled him a disappointment. He has that Miami Heat feel, that chip off the block, overlooked player. We obviously know what's gone on in the career of Jimmy Butler and how he has been overlooked in years prior. Tyler Herro falls to the 14th pick in the draft. Are you kidding me? Kendrick Nunn? Why was he not a first rounder? He was one of the best rookies last year, and he's still a really solid player. This team just has that feel of, we've been overlooked, let's go prove the world wrong. And I think Victor Oladipo just adds to that, and I love it. I'm a Knicks fan, but I really love the core foundations for this Miami Heat team. But enough said on the Heat. Everybody knows they did well this trade deadline. Loser number 1, we'll talk about the Toronto Raptors here. And I mean, they trade Norman Powell. They get Gary Trent Jr. And one other player in that deal. And Gary Trent's a younger version of Norman Powell. I mean, they're a little different, but Trent's a good young 3-and-D player. So, you got okay value there, but holding on to Kyle Lowry is just, it's foolish. He's going to leave this offseason. He's one of the greatest Raptors of all time. You might be able to make the argument, based off his entire career, the most accomplished Raptor of all time. But nonetheless, you got to get something for him. Something. I mean, like, if the 76ers are settling for George Hill, which that's kind of a weird move. I'm not a big George Hill guy. It feels like he's always traded at the deadline, but you got to get something in return for Kyle Lowry, because now you're going to get nothing. And that's a big disappointment. This is a team that needs to rebuild. You won the championship a couple years ago. Now rebuild. Start it over. You have Pascal Siakam, who I think can be either 1A to 1B on a championship level team. He already has been. But nonetheless, the Raptors, they definitely could have done better at the trade deadline. Winner number 2, we'll talk about the Denver Nuggets. And look, the Nuggets and then our winner number 3, I just like teams being aggressive and not wasting a player's prime. And with the Nuggets, you're not going to waste an MVP caliber season from Nikola Jokic. Go out there and get Aaron Gordon. He's a perfect fit. They got a lot of great play from Jeremy Grant towards the end and the playoff portion of last season. He leaves this offseason, sign and trade. He's now in Chicago. And Aaron Gordon's a really good fit. There's people out there who will argue Gordon's better. I'll leave that to you. But he has that type of play, and he's a good fit alongside Jokic. Does a lot of different things. He's a really good player at the 4. Magic have been trying to move him out to the wings, but I think he's a really solid stretch 4. And he's shooting the basketball better this year, which is good, and the Nuggets are going to need that to continue. They also add JaVale McGee. He's won an NBA championship. He's been around the block. Good experienced player to add to your bench group. And Denver sitting at 5th in the West. I don't know if they get any further, though. Lakers battling a lot of injuries. There might be some ground to be made up and climb up the Western Conference standings and potentially host if you get to that 4th seed or better. Loser number 2 is going to be the Boston Celtics. And it's tough to find losers because I don't think there's any teams that really did egregiously bad. I'm disappointed with how the Raptors trade deadline turned out, and I'm disappointed with what the Celtics couldn't do. They add Evan Fournier, career high, averaging almost 20 points a game. I'm not going to take that away, but I think a lot of his production, just like in years past, obviously a former Knick, he had some big games and had some inflated numbers because that team was so bad, and the Magic are battling a ton of injuries. There had to be someone else to score besides Nikola Vucevic, so that production went to Evan Fournier, who's a good player, but your best players are already wings. Like Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum already play out there. Tatum could be down to the 4. There's ways to mix in, Fournier, but I don't know. To me, if they were making a trade with the Magic, it needed to be for Vucevic. They have been looking for years now for that big to just transcend this team and take them to the next level. And also, they're losers because we have now hit the point where they squandered all those assets they got in that Brooklyn Nets deal. We might already be past that point, honestly. For, 3, maybe 5 years, we were talking about how the Celtics have so much assets. They're going to make a big move. They're going to add Boogie Cousins. They're going to go out there and add this A-tier player, and they're going to be a championship caliber team as opposed to just a good playoff team. And it never happened. Part of that is just because maybe they didn't see it was equal value. But at the same time, the NBA draft is it's not like the NFL draft. There's 30 picks in the NBA draft, and maybe 20 players who are definitely locks, like first-round talent. You look at them, you're like, that guy has to go in the first round. And then from there, you're pick and roll players and so on and so forth. Compared to the NFL, I look at 32 first-round picks, maybe this year 40 first-round graded players. There's an abundance of talent versus picks. The NBA is the other way around, so by Boston holding on to these picks, they got good players like Nesmith is, a solid player for them, but he's just a rotational piece. They waited so long, and instead of shipping those assets and getting a stud, somebody who could have taken them to the NBA Finals, maybe won of a championship, it's just turned into a bunch of good plus-level players, and now they're stuck in a season where they're sitting at 8th in the Eastern Conference, a half game ahead of the Pacers. They're in a position where they might not make the playoffs. That's crazy. That's not where this team should be at right now. Winner number 3, the Chicago Bulls. And again, same thing I said about the Nuggets. They're aggressive. They don't want to waste the prime of Zach LaVine. And I'm a huge Zach LaVine fan. There's always been rumors about the Knicks going out there and making a move, and I haven't gotten my hopes up too high, but I've always, a guy can hope. A guy can pray. I love LaVine. They're sitting at 10th in the East, 1.5 game backs of the Celtics, who we just talked about. So they're in that playoff hunt. They'd be outside the picture if the season ended today. But nonetheless, they go out there and add Vucevic, who is getting better as a shooter as his career's gone on. He's into his 30s, but he's still such a productive player. And him and LaVine, good 1-2 punch. You give up Wendell Carter and a few other assets down the line, but this is a win-now move. We want to make the playoffs. We're tired of being this team with promise. And same thing kind of what we talked about with the Timberwolves for years now. They're a good young team. They're promising. Well, eventually you got to put it together and you got to get the results to go with it. In Chicago, instead of saying, well, we're young and we, save these picks, maybe we'll add another player, maybe it'll click. They're like, nah, we're going to move these assets. We're going to go get a guy that we know is good. Vucevic gives them an elite low post, but also stretch big. They also get Al Farouk Amino, who is a solid wing defender. Don't hate that. And then they add players like, Troy Brown Jr. and Luke Cornett. I don't know what their role is going to be. Maybe they'll be decent rotation pieces, but nonetheless, good young players. And, it doesn't hurt to have them on the roster. I love Chicago being aggressive, trying to make a push for the playoffs, and because of that, they're winner number 3. Last team we'll talk about, the Houston Rockets, come in at loser number 3. So they didn't pull a Raptors. They did move on from Depot, and they weren't going to be able to keep him this offseason. He already declined an extension. But now you look back at that James Harden trade, and it's like, why didn't you keep Karis LeVert? LeVert you would have had control of, and he would have been under contract for more than just till the end of this season, and he's a really good young player. Now you're just getting Depot as a rental, and now you're trading him for Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk and a few other picks. But that Heat team's going to be good, so what are those picks really worth? So, the Rockets, I don't know if they could have done more. Ultimately, I think the decision comes back to, why didn't you take Karis LeVert? Because now you look at that James Harden trade, and it is super lopsided. It was already, I think the Nets won, but there was a lot of first-round picks going to Houston. And then if they got Karis LeVert, you say, okay, they got late first-round picks basically from the Nets because they're going to be good, but also Karis LeVert. That's a building block. Now it's, you got picks from the Nets, some from the Heat, and Avery Bradley and Kelly Olynyk to show for it. That's disappointing. But that's going to do it for our 3 winners and losers. I will talk about a few other teams here, some honorable mentions. I do like the move for the Clippers. It was one that had to grow on me. Initially, I was saying, man, they traded Lou Will for Rajon Rondo, but Rondo's won championships. He has that ability to take it to the next level. Playoff Rondo is something we hear all the time. It's the NBA equivalent to, playoff Lenny for NFL fans. And also this team needed a ball handler. They needed to take the workload off the shoulders of Paul George, Kawhi Leonard, let him work off the ball. So I think there is good benefit that Rondo brings. Plus Lou Will's playing 7 less minutes, taking 4 less shots a game, I think the stats were. So his role has diminished. And also now he gets to go to Atlanta, who's 8-1, I think, under Nate McMillan. I don't know why Nate McMillan was fired from Indiana in the first place, but that's another talk for another day. But they're starting to pick it up, and now they get to add a good wing player, a good bench scorer in Lou Will. He's from that area. Obviously, we know about the hot wings scandal in the bubble last year. That's a great storyline. I'm glad he's playing in Atlanta, so I like that trade for both sides, ultimately. And we'll talk about the 76ers a little bit here. Look, they add George Hill, and basically they just didn't want to break the bank for Kyle Lowry, so they got Kyle Lowry light. I don't know. George Hill gets traded what feels like every year. And I get he's still a good player. When he shoots the ball well, he can, open up the offense. And, he knows how to run an offense to that point. And they didn't have to give up as much. The Knicks were involved in that trade. I hate to see Austin Rivers go. I actually really enjoyed watching him. More so early on in the year, his role has gotten smaller and smaller. Even though I think he's a better player than Elfrid Payton. But I don't know. Just me. Nonetheless, the Knicks get Terrence Ferguson out of it. Good young defensive player. We'll see how that pans out. He kind of fits that Tom Thibodeau build. And then the Oklahoma City Thunder get some picks out of the deal. And dude, Sam Presti is about to just have a monopoly on the NBA draft. But at the same time, I hope he doesn't do what the Celtics did and just sit on all these assets. Granted, they have enough holes and positions to be filled around Shai Gilgeous-Alexander that holding on to those picks will be beneficial. They don't have superstar caliber players. I think SGA can get there, and he's on the verge of being that. But they don't have a second superstar, so maybe you wait a couple years before you start shipping these assets out to go out and get that third part of a big three and put the Thunder back on the map as serious contenders. But, dude, Sam Presti he's building something interesting, and I don't know if you've ever seen anything quite like it in the NBA. And we'll close it out, a couple of bigs that weren't able to be traded, Andre Drummond and LaMarcus Aldridge. So, Aldridge has already been bought out. Drummond, by the time I'm recording this, I don't think has, but by the time you're seeing this, he might have been bought out. There's some interest from the Knicks. The Lakers are interested in Drummond. Aldridge looks like he's going to Miami. So contenders outside of the Knicks, they're just kind of a mid-level playoff team. But if the Lakers were to get Drummond and the Heat get Aldridge, good teams get richer. And it works out for those players' opportunity to, title chase. So unfortunate that the teams that they were playing for, the Cavs and the Spurs respectively, couldn't get anything for them. But in the NBA, with the buyout, you definitely don't have to go out there and be eager to make a trade. Even if it's just for a second-round pick, it's just we'll buy him out, we'll get him for cheap, and we'll hold on to that second-round pick, though it may not be super valuable. it's an asset nonetheless. So that's going to do it for the video. Comment down below if you think I'm right on, which picks I'm wrong on, who did I leave out, and also give me your thoughts overall on the NBA trade deadline. I hope you all did enjoy the video. Hit the like button if you did, and if you're new to the channel, like sports content, please consider hitting that subscribe button. And until next time, everybody, my name's Tej, and I'm signing off.
I'm part of the last generation that remembers time of God. She's